what can I say?
Yeah.
So Irish and Staffords, they're bulldogs. They are one and the same. But if you have a naive police officer that stops you in the street at the time and said, that's a leggy dog, that's a pit. No, sir, it's an Irish. Before they started getting glued up, it was a loophole. So before, one and the same. After, a loophole in marketing. Today, we don't hear much about the Irish dogs today. It seems to have sort of died a death. People, the people that I knew in England that bred pits were very, very discreet. You wouldn't know anything about them. They didn't sell to the public. They did whatever they did. Very discreet. And they still exist today. And the Staffordshire Bull Terrier is, if you like, it's the sort of, for everybody, for Joe Public. Everybody can have a Stafford. But if you want a sort of fast-lane dog, you have to know the people and be recommended. It's a different sort of group of people. But to answer your question, the Irish dogs and the English dogs, for me, were one and the same.
So can you, for a layman, somebody who doesn't know the difference in the history behind it, what is the difference between the American Pit Bull Terrier and the Staffordshire, and where did the American Pit Bull Terrier come from? What is the lineages there?
Again, it's like the history of the Bulldog that always existed, and the cross between the old English and the Bulldog. It's two trains of thought. Basically, the Staffordshire Bull Terrier or the Pit Bulldog always existed. Now, when the English, the Irish, and the Scots left the United Kingdom, when they quit to go and seek their fortune in America, they took their dogs with them. Now, these were Staffordshires or Irish dogs or whatever you want to call them. They go to America, and people then, there's Cockney Charlie Lloyd and all the characters on the sort of East Coast that used to fight their dogs and stuff would send back, because a lot of them were Irish immigrants, and they would send back to get dogs from the old country. So you could say they were Staffordshires. But it was documented that they then breed these dogs very often to the local dogs, tough dogs, bigger dogs. They wanted a bigger type of dog. They don't want just these smaller dogs, something a bit bigger. And that went towards the American Pit Bull Terrier. So this is just from what I've read and what I've understood, is the Pit Bulldog, which later became known as the Staffordshire Bull Terrier, went to America, and then with local dogs and local breeding, became a bigger type dog, which was the Pit Bull. That's a Pit Bull Terrier. So you have a Pit Bulldog, it's a Pit Bull Terrier. No. And so it's an appellation again. And then you had, that's a pit. And then later on down the line, I think it was in the 1940s, when they decided the pit, it was the Dangerous Dog Blood Sports Act in America. They stopped it. You had pit bulls that decided, well, we're going to stop using it for fighting, and we're going to start showing. So that's when the pits divided into two, and then you had your American Staffordshire Terriers and your pit bulls. But, you even had, up until the 1980s, you had pit bulls that were registered as Amstaffs and pit bulls. They had a double nationality, if you like. But it's one and the same breed. So for me, you had your rough and tumble pit bulldogs, which are known as Staffordshire Bull Terriers, went to America. They were crossed and bred and became bigger and maybe more efficient, who knows. Suddenly became a bit different, and then they were Pit Bull Terriers. So we put an appellation on them, and we called them their American Pit Bull Terriers. They're ours, they're American. Okay, so, and then down the line, you got the Amstaffs, which is just the show version, if you like, from the original pits. So that's, again, people will argue until the cows come home, but quite simply, if you do a lot of reading, I've got an extensive library down there, and I spend the last 30 years listening more than I speak. I ask questions and I listen, and from what I've developed, it's as simple as that, because pedigree dog breeding only happened in the last sort of 100 years. It was when money got involved. I mean, when the Kennel Club, they decided to get involved because they knew there was money. The minute you put a paper on a dog, it's worth more. Why is it worth more? For example, if you have a working dog, a border collie, it earns its living. Why, the minute you put a paper on it, it's suddenly worth more? Jack Russell Terriers. I remember Jack Russells when I was back in the UK. On a Friday night, someone will pull up in a van and open the doors, and there would be a box of puppies. And for buying the guy a couple of pints, you could have a pup. Now they're worth £1,000 a pup.